Pajama pants, step one. We're now ready to sew our pajama pants together. So if we're looking at our directions, here's 1 of 3. We're gonna come over to 2 of 3, where we start on pants C or shorts D. So this is where our directions are starting. Before we really jump into this though, let's take a look at our pattern pieces. Sometimes once you've removed the pattern pieces, it's really hard to tell the front from the back. But there are several differences between the two. Though they look similar, they are different. Your back side is much, much wider. That's to help give room for the back side of your body there. You'll notice that this side, the front, is a little bit narrower. The second big difference is this arch right here. Once again, that's to give room for the back side and the extra cushion you have on your butt. This, the front crotch seam, is not nearly as large. The third key difference is the notches. You have a triple notch in the back and a double notch in the front. So those are ways that you can tell the front from the back as you remove the pattern pieces. Now, because this is a pattern, I can use this over and over and over again. It's not something that I want to throw away. If I ever want to make another pair of pajama pants, I don't need to go buy another pattern. I can just use this one. So I'm going to fold it up and get it back into my envelope. Now, our first set of directions here say that we're going to put some interfacing where we're going to be sewing a buttonhole. You only really need to do this step if you are going to do a drawstring. I am just going to do an elastic waist, so I don't need to do that step. It's an optional step. So step number 2 says to put your front with your back and sew the inseam right there. You're not sewing the parts that don't match up. You're just sewing down the inseam of the leg. So what you do to one leg, we're gonna do to the other. Now with fabric like what I'm working with here, sometimes it's really hard to tell the ugly side from the pretty side. I know that this is my pretty side because of how I laid my fabric out. So I just need to make sure that I keep this my pretty side. One way to do this is to simply lay your 2 pattern pieces out, because we want to make sure we don't sew 2 of the same leg, so that my pretty sides are both up. So I've got both of my pretty sides up here. Now I'm going to take my back pieces and I'm going to lay them out pretty side down on top of my front legs. You want to start right up here at the top crotch seam. You're going to match up those notches. That's the whole function for the notches at this point. And I'm just going to put a couple of pins in there to line this up. And I'm just going to keep adjusting my fabric until it lines up exactly the way we want it to. Now you'll notice I'm putting my pins in far enough apart that I'm not putting them pin to pin to pin. I'm putting them perpendicular through where I'm going to be sewing. You'll notice that my ends down here are not matching up exactly. They're not exactly the same length. That's okay. I can trim that off and make that work later. If my hole is up here, then I'm going to have a hole in my crotch seam. We don't want the hole there. It's a lot easier to make adjustments down here at the hem. So what I do to one side, I do to the other leg. So now once again, I'm going to match this up. Make sure that you're matching up those notches. They should line up. I'm just going to continue working down my inseam here, matching up those edges. This is one of the reasons why you want to cut straight. If you're cutting straight, your fabric's going to line up much, much easier. Couple more pins here. See, and you'll notice this side lines up really, really well. They should both be exactly the same. Okay, so now I'm going to stitch from here down to there. I am using a 5/8 inch seam allowance. So I am lining up right here. I'm putting my presser foot down. My fabric is about halfway back underneath my foot sole, and I'm going to start stitching. We're going to work our way, bobbin winder's on, stitch a couple stitches, back stitch a couple stitches. I'm going to sew directly over the pins. Some teachers will teach you to not sew over the pins. I believe that's a little bit of a personal preference. I believe the pins act like lots of little fingers to hold your fabric in place, so your fingers can be doing something else. We're just going to work our way. Remember, it's the machine's job to do the work. All we have to do is keep it lined up right there on that 5/8 of an inch mark. As we're working our way all the way down our inseam. As we approach the opposite end, we are going to backstitch just 2 or 3 stitches, needle up, trim off those threads. We're going to pull out all of these pins. Now, your directions for commercial patterns do not identify steps where you need to seam finish. This is one of the reasons why it was a good idea to transfer those notes from your teacher's directions. This is a step where we want to finish the edge of this seam, or it's going to continue to fray and ravel and give us problems. So now we want to go over to the serger and serge this seam. As you're serging, don't cut off too much fabric because you don't want to go over your seam line. Your serging should be about right in here. Okay, so you're just trimming off maybe 1/8 of an inch. What you do to one leg, you do to the other. Keep in mind, these seams right here, they didn't match up. You have a triple notch here and a single or a double notch here. That's because these seams don't match up, so don't sew there yet. We'll sew there at a later step.